Good morning, Carlo. This is Justin. Also, I go by Gerard on the different Saber forums. Alright, so like I was saying, I did the prism discs specifically for you, and then I made a couple extra sets in case others were wanting to use a higher end board for their builds. Functionally, they work the same way as the nanobiscuits, especially if you're going to put your boards in the emitter ends of your Saber. Is the best way to do this. This is Corbanth's personal version of this. I'm doing the install for him. When he had a guy do his weathering, and so these don't come off, so I can't show you how that's going to look. But I can show you how it looks in the opposite end. Alright, so real quick, the coupler has the same inner diameter as these cuffs. And the reason that the rods are set up like this is so they fit through the cuff. And then once you get everything nice and tight, you want to cap this off, and that's what the brass standoffs are for that I sent you. You're going to want to cut them down so they're inside the cuff, the ends of the rods, and then you're going to use your standoffs to set your size based on how you want to put this together on the inside. There's a couple of different ways to do this. With the nanobiscuits, the cuff that I used, they fit right into it, and then that way you can slide it in and out of the inside of the cuff if you want. For the prism, it's a little longer board, so what you'll probably want to do is use your stabilizer and then put that down at the opposite end. So when you set your standoffs, put them in about there, and then you're going to want to use longer screws. You can dig around online, you can find different sizes of the 440 ones. If you're not having any luck, let me know and I can send you a couple real quick for free. And then I'll pull out the emitter section out of Corbanth's, and I'll show you how I have that set up. Alright, so you've already kind of got a pretty good head start, right? You want these two discs together in the end. With the nanobiscuit version, there's a separate plate right there. It's got the same cutout for the board, but it's round all the way around, and that was meant to just be like a stationary plate to provide structural support for when you get it all tucked in together. There wasn't really a need to send the same type of a spacer or the same type of a end plate there, because the prism ones had to be full size to accommodate the dimensions of the card. You got a couple different ways you could run your wires. You got the board fits in right through there, and it should be pretty snug. You got a lot of room to play there, and once you get your wires passing above and below the board, it'll fit in there nice and tight. If you do end up with a little extra room, you could put like a tiny piece of electrical tape around the edges of the board to fit it in, or across the top. Just little bits of plastic or whatever. If you have the larger heat shrink, that actually works pretty good too. But it's all up to you. These channels on the outside, these are meant as wire pass-throughs for the wires for the well, pretty much whatever. Like if you want to run them above and then through in these little spaces right here. So if you don't put two nuts, you can make a bigger space. That's for the LED module. Run them through when you get them wired up, and then that'll go above and through, or you could go straight over the top of the card like I did with the nanobiscuit. I highly recommend 28 gauge wire. The thinner stuff works better. The thicker stuff I suggest always for the LED modules on account of the heat generated by the LEDs. Something thinner, you're run the risk of melting off the plastic coating on the outside, the insulation. So when I do all of my modules, I use the thicker wire to run through, and then once it's on the back side of the heatsink, I'll usually snip those, and then I'll run the wires from the board with the 28 gauge and then solder those directly to the thicker wire, and then heat shrink around the connection, and that so far has been really effective. Alright, so that's pretty much how that goes. And then again, this is meant to be a floating module, so once you get your thread size the way you want it, you want to go in and cut it, and then use your brass standoffs, and then you have like a cap screw that goes on the end there. You run your wires out here. Where you put your resistors for your LEDs, there isn't a lot of room to hide them up in the end of the hilt, so you're going to want to run the wires, all four from your LEDs, over the top of the board or around it, or however you want to get it, and then hide your LEDs in here between the threads in the back of the card. Now with the prism, If you want more room, if you want to tuck it in a little further, like I said, set that up where your stabilizer goes there. Line it up with your screw, like so. And then this will pretty much free float and the rest of the stuff stays stationary, so it's pretty easy to set up. This particular cuff, you don't want to do that. I did that for, this is a different section I'm using as an example here, but this is actually where I'm putting his Corbant's recharge port. Since he didn't want the end one, I'm actually having it set up right there, and then I made an adapter you could do like a turnkey to turn power on. But for yours, you got the ones where it'll stick out the back end. You'll want that for the dual saber setup, on account of that there's really not enough room to do anything else. Okay. So this part's empty. Alright, so this half of the hilt here, this is an 18650 battery, and you can see it's actually a full inch longer than the 14s, which is the type that I used for my brother's saber. I went with the shorter batteries because there were 2 separate batteries for each saber, and the power requirements last a while, and unless you're going to have these things turn on for hours and hours and hours at a time, it's really all you need. The bigger batteries are nice. If you're going to go to a con, you're going to have the stuff lit up for a while, or in this case, since it's one board with 2 sets of LEDs, this will function just like the 2 smaller batteries. And because of the length, I can only really fit one in here anyway. So there's the thing there with the batteries, is you're going to need to get one of the shorter, or if you're going to do 2 boards, you want 2 of the shorter batteries from Custom Saber Shop. They're not as expensive, and they actually last a lot longer than they look. But the construction is pretty much the same. Alright, so that's pretty much how that works. Now with yours, you're going to have, let's see, when you get yours put together, make sure this is in frame. Okay, you're going to have your emitter section goes up here, and this is going to peek out into the center of where these threads are. Right, so that's going to poke up just a little. The threads on the emitters, these are pretty short, so they don't go down all the way, so you got a little bit of clearance there, and that's where you're going to want to make the call on how spaced out you want to make these. One option would be to have the 3 sit flush, and then have 2 nuts here spacing out the one in the middle, so you've got a pass through for your wires on the end there. If it's still taking up a lot of room, then you can flatten all 4 of them out, and in that case you definitely want to put your stabilizer ring further down in the cuff. That way you've got a little room to slide in and out of this space in here. But you want to play around with it, don't glue anything, and dry fit everything again and again and again until you're sure you got it right before you cut. But that's another thing that's nice about the standoffs, is there's you a little wiggle room in there. So if you cut them off just past this bit right here, or even a little further down, you can use longer 440 screws as your set screws in the back there, and then it gives you a little play for sizing purposes. So alright, yeah, that'll poke out there. The inner diameter of your emitters is the same as the cuff, it's the same as the coupler, and they are specifically these are specifically made for this diameter, so they fit right in nice and tight, and that's actually why I have the 2 holes drilled right here. Let's see, can you see that? Alright, you've got the one for your blade retention screw. Originally I tried to put them a little further up on the last build I did, but the metal here is so thin you couldn't get a set screw. It was just not enough there, and it looked silly with the set screw poking up the top. So you can use a short 8/32 right there, and then use a longer 8/32 down here, and this is what holds your LED module in place. And that will actually, once you get it in there, it sits about like that, because you've got the inner lip with the threads poke into the surface there, but you want to get it just about right. And then when you put your blade plug in, so I took the top piece off here, but you'll get that in and get it to where it sits flush with the end of the emitter, and then have it push down on this. And once you got your wires and everything in there, it's going to get a little springy action, so it'll actually sit a little higher. But you definitely want to sand these out before you try to stick them in there, because it is kind of a tight fit. This cast metal is really easy to work with. It's easy to sand, it's easy to clean, it's easy to drill, but go slowly. Like, take your time when you're working these pieces, because if you go too fast or too hard, you are going to take off more material than you intended, and it's going to complicate things later. So be patient. Alright, so yeah, it's about right there. Alright, now one of the tricks is you'll probably want to build the hilt first and do your emitters last. That way when you get them all set up, you could slide them in, put this on, and then as you thread it, you want to watch from the inside, and you'll see that your LED module is actually going to sit still and stay in place while you're doing this. If it's turning while you're turning this, you have to run the risk of pulling wires on the inside. So that's one of the reasons I sand these down on the inside, is so we get a nice free spinning LED module, and then when it's all said and done, you're going to use your set screw to hold it in place, and that'll keep it from sliding up. It'll keep it from sliding back into the hilt. You're good to go. Also, with your soundboard, let's see, put this on, line it up with the screw hole so you can see. You see your soundboard, you're going to have plenty of space in there for wires. So if you want to get some extra wire in there for your LED modules, then that'll pretty much just corkscrew. And then you can play around with, you know, when you're threading and you're turning, if you spin the wires in an opposite direction, like coil backwards, and then as you thread this part, it actually turns the correct way, and then when it's all said and done, you get a nice snug, but not too snug, coiled up wires there in the end. Alright, now for the battery and the speaker, let's see. Let me try and set this down so you can see it. And you can see right away with these larger batteries, you've got very little wiggle room. With this particular configuration, you're going to have your speaker set up down here, you're going to have your battery in the center, and then you're going to have your LED module up front. Like I said, this is a separate piece. This is not all one continuous threaded rod, because as you can see, the diameters are different for these the discs, right? The outer diameter is the same, but the inner diameter, the parts of the sections where the parts pass through, had to be different to accommodate the size of the parts. Because of the width of the battery, I had to do it like this. There wasn't any other way. Alright, so you're going to have adapters, and you can see where I was messing with those right here. You've got all your stuff built together here, and then your recharge port's going to go in the back. Your speaker's going to sit up front, and then there's a space in the middle where the back of the recharge port set. All this is empty in here, so this is a good place to hide resistors. So I'm assuming you're going with the prism because you want to do the accent LEDs. These right here. Alright, so you can hide your resistors for those in there. Okay. So you'll have your end cap, you'll have a adapter disc, and then you'll have your little sandwich right here where your 20mm speaker is going to fit. And then the battery comes off the same threads you would use for your speaker sandwich, and it all fits out to about right there. Now, this is the same length of thread I use for the shorter batteries, because I had all these pre-cut before I started buying the parts for it. And you can see that it's, you know, there's quite a bit left over here. Now, this doesn't have the speaker attached, so it looks like it'll fit just like this if I wanted it to. But for your purposes, for the double saber, you need the shorter battery in order for this to all fit together. One other thing I wanted to go over real quick is the lock nuts. These are important to keep everything nice and tight and held in place when you're doing your build. You don't have to shave the ones that go on the recharge port because it fits easily inside the diameter of the saber. And then for these you might have to, but I don't think so, because again, these inner diameter screws, these the tighter fit here, they should fit perfectly within the diameter of the discs, so you shouldn't have to change any of that at all. But for this battery and the speaker section, take your Dremel and you will use the metal cutting wheel and just gently go back and forth, like take the flat end and then just shave it down. If you go too hard too fast, you're going to cut into the acrylic. Now if it's all put together like this, it's not such a big deal because it all kind of melts together. But if you plan on taking it apart again after you make the adjustment, just you want to let it cool down all the way before you start removing screws, because if you try to mess with it while the plastic's still hot, there's a potential it could break. This material is pretty thin, and the reason I went with this particular thickness was it was the best way to get the different size and shape discs we need in order to make this work. Because if you get any thicker, then you run out of space a lot faster, and then it doesn't all go together. When it's all said and done, you should have maybe a centimeter of room once it's all tucked up and snug next to each other between your emitter section, your battery section, which is all this is all connected. And then you're going to have your wires, again, leave, you know, maybe, I don't want to say 5 centimeters, but you could do 3 or 4 centimeters of slack between your soundboard module and then the rest of your stuff here. The recharge port's back here, so one of the things you're going to want to do is when you get your battery, you're going to take this and then loop it through, and then this enough space right here, like vertical space, that you can fit your a JST connector. So when you want to connect that to your you see me? You can fit that just fine, and you can see that in the pictures, and I'll show that real quick. Okay, so the good news is everything you have should still fit normally. Oh, for the standoffs, if you got the version of this disc where the holes fit the threads exactly, you're going to want to put the fat ends of your standoffs facing up. If you got the version with the slightly bigger hole, the 4mm hole, then you can use the little ends, the cuffs, the thinner diameter cuffs, and then poke that up through the plastic. There were 2 iterations of that based on requests I had from other users, so they were kind of a mishmash when I put the kits together. But I think the Prisms all had this version. So I'm going to pull the emitter section out of Corban, so we're going to take a look at how that's put together. And that'll give you a good idea how to work the standoffs. And I'll show you what the speaker section looks like when it's all put together as well. Quick note with the Prism V5 that's coming out, the way the sensor or the motion sensors are designed, you don't have to stick this all the way up in your emitter section, but with if you're doing a double saber, there isn't a lot of room to move things around. Your best bet is to do that, but if you end up changing your mind and going with the single board configuration, you can actually put your soundboard and your speaker in the middle and then have your sound pointed out towards the coupler, so you're going to have your speaker facing this way. And then that leaves a big open space up here for you to just, you could slide the cuff in and leave it. You could use it however you want to do it. Okay. Alright. So this is an example of the soundboard part for like a nanobiscuit. You can see it's configured pretty much the same way, it's just bigger discs on the end. This one is shaved down, and the reason I did that was because it's facing the back end versus one of the emitters, so this needed to be able to fit into the coupler. So for a Prism, because of the size of the board, that's not going to work. You're pretty much going to have to put yours on the emitter ends, because there's no overlap with this part up here. This actually sits above it by almost an inch, so you got plenty of room to work with. Alright, so for your speaker, this is pretty simple. You got your main assembly up here, whichever it happens to be, if it's recharge port or emitter, however you set it up. Got your threads, you got your standoffs, you can see right there, okay, and these butt up against your acrylic discs. There was a type of disc that I used for the recharge port that you have that has these slots on both sides, and those are actually meant for like where you put your switch in, it goes in right there. Now they're also handy for adapters, so here instead of using set screws, I used hex head screws, which fit the diameter that we need for the interior of the saber, and they fit really nicely inside this crevice. So I actually ended up using this as an adapter ring for this build for Corban. Let's see, and then you get it up in there, you got your hex heads right there that are connecting this band of the module to the rest of the cuff, and then this side you've got your first speaker disc, which has got the outer channels, and then what that's for in your case is you're going to run from your recharge port, and your switch is going to sit right there. Those wires are going to come up out of this crevice over the top of the speaker, let's see, right there, and then into the channels on the other discs. And these discs here are the same for the battery, they're the same for the back end of the speaker, and you can see The reason for that is your solder points for your speaker wires actually fit inside two of these little notches, and then your wires come out the other side here. And then when you put your battery together on that, you want to not snug this up. Like you got two of these, so you're going to want to space these out for the smaller battery, and then you run your wires over, under, and up, and then you want to run them through one of these channels. One side of this is going to be the wires for your battery connection, and the other two channels are going to be for your speaker, your switch, and your recharge port. And that's the part of the recharge port that goes to the soundboard. That's going to be a positive and negative wire. So you'll have a total of 6 28 gauge wires. Now, because of the size of those little wires, you can fit all 6 of them into one of these channels. But I like to space mine apart to keep them organized so I can get them to work a little easier. So typically I put the power through one, and I'll put the speaker and the switch through the other. That way I don't accidentally plug one of those components into the wrong part of the board when I get that far. Now with the 18650, like if you do it like that, you can see that it's okay right there, there, and then you set your battery up the same length. It actually goes all the way into the next one down. Well, you don't have to follow this design exactly. There was one of the reasons I didn't give too much direction with the discs, because different users are going to find different ways of using them to the most effective method, and other people are going to come up with stuff that I didn't even think of to make theirs work as well. So feel free to get creative. Just understand that this is, even for me, crazy difficult build. Try to be patient, don't give up, and continue asking questions if you need to. Hopefully this was helpful and I didn't cause more confusion than I cleared up. If I do get to do a build specific to a prism, I will make sure to take a ton of pictures and do a quick video tour of how it all went together before I finish the install, and that way I can share it with you. Alright, here we go.